thing or two. Um, all right. Okay. Now, let's have a word of prayer and then we'll get started. Father, thank you for these dear brothers and sisters who are um, committed to studying even under these circumstances. And we pray, Father, that you will honor their love for your word, encourage us with your word, and open to us this difficult book of Leviticus. We depend on you. We cannot do anything apart from you, and we ask for your Spirit's ministry among us. For Jesus' sake, we pray. Amen. Um, I was trying to think a while ago where we stopped. I suspect it's around a point where I would be dealing with Exodus 19. So we're still in the introduction to the book of Leviticus, and the reason for this, folks, is if you don't know the context, then you don't know what the passage that you're studying is trying to accomplish. So I'm taking us back just to review. I'm arguing that the book of Genesis is not primarily a book of beginnings. You will understand that the word Genesis was used by later Christians to describe the book. It is not the name of the book itself. In Hebrew, the first two words, or in English, the first three words, Bereshit, in the beginning, is the name of the book. Um, so I'm arguing that the book of Genesis is, in fact, a book teaching faith. I just finished writing a chapter on Eve's faith this morning, and I'm very pleased to have made that step. I'm on the next chapter dealing with Cain and Abel and their faith or lack of faith response to God. But right through, and I asked this last week, why would God give us the stories of Adam, Cain and Abel, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph? What is it about those stories that make that material an important introduction to the 5 books of Moses? And my answer is because of their patterns of faith. There were some many who lived by faith, but some who didn't and failed miserably. So Genesis introduces the 5 books of Moses with teaching about faith. Deuteronomy, as we mentioned last week, is divided into 3 parts, chapters 1 to about 11, and then 12 to 29, 28, and then 29 to 32, 34. The middle section of Deuteronomy is law, but the first division, 1 to 11, and the second division, 29 to 34, is not about law at all. It's about faith. So what I'm suggesting is Moses is writing to people, calling them to faith, but they have rejected faith. And what we're going to do today, as we start with this chapter 19 of Exodus, is look at the point where Israel really failed in faith. This is we tend to think of Israel as being disobedient, and they are. I wish I knew your culture better. For an American, rules are the very most important things you can have. So when you get a new game, you learn the rules. A man told me a number of years ago, 30 years ago, Jim, you're a good teacher, but you'll never be a great preacher until we just make a tweak or two. And what you need to do is tell people what to do. I, I thought to myself, I do. I call them to faith. But when we think about Eve, we think about her sin. Yes, right? Is that true? Yeah.
Yes.
Uh, what is the nature of her sin? And we will almost always say, well, she disobeyed God by eating the fruit. That's not her sin. That's her disobedience, but it's not her sin. Her sin is rejecting the word of God in place of the word of the serpent. So she believes the serpent and she doesn't believe God at all. That's her sin, and from her sin flows disobedience. And that's very important to me to convey to you. In Exodus 19, we may have even gotten started on Exodus 19 last time. But in Exodus 19, please forgive me for licking my fingers, but my fingerprints are almost gone. And my skin is so soft I can't turn the Bible paper. So please forgive me for licking my fingers to turn. I have no other way to turn these pages than that. So chapter 19, verse 1. On the third new moon, after the people of Israel had gone out of Egypt, on the very day they came into the wilderness of Sinai, they set out, and we have something of their trip. Verse 5, God says to them, now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice, keep my covenant, you shall be to me my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. If they're to be a kingdom of priests, and this is always a sticking point, at least in my experience of teaching this material, what does it mean to be a kingdom of priests? Just to make a connection, hold your finger there in Exodus 19 and go to 1 Peter chapter 2. In 1 Peter chapter 2, there's a very important statement about what God intends for us. So in 1 Peter 2 and verse, let's see, what verse is that?
9.
9?
9.
Yes, in fact, yeah. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession. We are now, as a people, a royal priesthood. I must hasten to say, and let's go back to Exodus 19. I must hasten to say that the New Testament never calls an individual Christian a priest, unless he was a Levitical priest before he came to Christ. But no individual Christian is ever called a priest. But we as a people are a priesthood. And if we're a priesthood, we need to know how to function. What does this priesthood look like? How does it work? So that would be a study that would be worth pursuing in days to come. But right now, we're going back to Leviticus. So what Israel, we're going to see what Israel rejected, God has given to us. This is in line with what Paul says in Romans 9 and 10 and 11, in fact, that God has given to us the privileges of Israel to stir them up to jealousy. And of course, we've been living in the blessing of God so richly that Israel is profoundly jealous of the church. Is that true? The answer is no, because we haven't really been living in the grace of God. In America, you there's a way of organizing a sermon. It's going to be a little bit odd to you. It makes sense to Americans, but it might not make quite sense until I explain it for folks in India. But hook, book, look, and took. All right. Well, what has that to do with a sermon? Well, the hook is, how do you get the people's attention and draw them into the message? So then you look at the book. So book, and you look at what it's trying to say and communicate to the people, then you give them the took. What are you to take away from this sermon? What are you to do in light of this sermon? Well, invariably, it's some kind of rule to follow. It's some kind of behavior you haven't been engaging in. Yeah. Almost never is you can really trust God in light of this passage. You can really trust God. What I'm arguing is that we are not supposed to make new rules for people because the rules don't help. And I'm going to try to show you that this evening. So in Exodus 19, he has expressed the option for Israel to embrace a status as a kingdom of priests. And the question I asked, I think last week, did they ever become a kingdom of priests? And since I can't see a number of you because there is maybe I can do that. I can see more of you now, but I can't see the group of you all at once. Did Israel ever become a kingdom of priests? And the answer would be
No.
no. I think we said last week that their function as a kingdom of priests was to live so richly under the blessing of God that it would draw the nations to them. And in writing last week on faith, on Leviticus, in fact, I'm working on two studies that I'm writing right now. In writing last week on Leviticus, the oy vey, what came to me? The point is something that I've forgotten. So the jury will please disregard this preceding statement, and we will press on. So does Israel ever really practice faith? And I'm going to try to show you that they don't. God has a position he offers them, and we'll need to see what happened. So they responded in verse 8. All the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. And Moses reported the words of the people to the Lord. Verse 9, the Lord said to Moses, behold, I am coming to you in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you, and may all also believe in you forever. When Moses told the words of the people to the Lord said to Moses, go to the people, consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments. Now, folks, this is part of the ordination ceremony for Israel. If you're going to be a priesthood, you need an ordination ceremony. Yes, you don't just wake up one morning and discover you're a priest and start functioning. You're number one, appointed by God. Number two, then ordained, and there is a ritual that goes into that. And in verse 11, be ready for the third day, for on the third day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. We talked about the limitations, the barrier that was put at the foot of the mountain. The barrier is there because they are not ordained yet. In Exodus, I believe it's Exodus 3, God said to Moses, this will be the sign that I have sent you. When you have brought this people out of Egypt, you will worship me on this mountain. And our Bibles have different readings there, but the Hebrew word that's translated on is a word that normally means to put one thing on top of another. Does that make sense? Yes? All right. Some of the English translations that we use in the U.S. read, you shall worship me at this mountain. I'm not aware that word is used that way ever anywhere else. That doesn't mean anything because prepositions are very common, very frequently used in Hebrew. And there would be hundreds of passages, and I haven't looked at them to see exactly what is used there. But normally speaking, You put one thing on another, and that's what that preposition means. So in Exodus 3, he promised that as a sign to Moses that it was really God who was sending him, that the people would worship God on the mountain. So what's the barrier doing there? They're not ordained yet. They have to go through the ordination ritual. They have to wait for the amount of time that they must wait. They must bathe and wash their garments and not engage in sexual relations with their spouses, because every sign of human sexuality must be kept far distant from the worship of the Lord. The Lord is not a fertility God, and he is not worshiped by fertility rituals. And so no vestige of sexuality may be brought into the presence of the Lord. And that remains all the way through the law of Moses. So we've gotten to verse 12, you shall set limits. Verse 13, now, no hand shall touch him, but he shall be stoned or shot, whether beast or man, he shall not live. But we read the first part of verse 13 and never pay attention to the last part of verse 13. When the trumpet sounds a long blast, they shall come up to, and my text says to the mountain. Perhaps yours does as well. The assumption has always been that they were to worship God at a distance and only Moses would go up the mountain. But I've given you reason to believe that Moses was intended actually to take the people up the mountain, because the mountain is becoming a geographical temple. Did we mention that phrase before? No? Okay. The Garden of Eden. Why were Adam and Eve expelled from the Garden of Eden? Well, you will say sin. I will agree with you to that. But there's another reason. The Garden of Eden is a geographical temple. How do you know God's temple? What is the distinctive about God's temple in the Old Testament? Any answers? Any ideas?
The presence of God may rest on that.
The presence of God. Well, God was present in the Garden of Eden, and God drove them from his presence. It was a geographical temple, and as a geographical temple, they, as having lost their ordination, as it were, they are expelled from the temple. Later in the Old Testament, God is going to call Jerusalem a temple. Not just the hill of Moriah a temple, but the whole of Jerusalem is a temple. And he will call the land of Israel a temple. So these terms are used in odd ways for us, because we think of a temple, we always think of a building, but it's a place where God uniquely reveals his glory. Mount Sinai is a place where God uniquely reveals his glory. That makes it a geographical temple. And the effect of that is, if Israel is to be a priestly people, then they are to worship God not just at the temple, but in the temple. I remind you that the Levites were not permitted to go inside the tabernacle. Only the priests were. Well, if Israel is a priesthood, then they can go in the temple. Does that make sense? Later, how much later is this? Oh dear. I'm sure I can't find it quickly. Later in the covenant making ritual, and at this point, my mind is a blank on where that specifically is. When Moses took the blood and he sprinkled it on the people and he said, "This is the blood of the covenant which the Lord is making with you. Perhaps one of you can help me recover that reference.
That's chapter 24, verse 8.
Thank you. Good. Exodus 24.
8, sir.
Yes. I'm still turning to the chapter here. In chapter 24, he sprinkles the people. And then a very important event occurs. Verse 9, Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel went up where? In an elevator? Where did they go up?
Mountain.
Yeah, they went up Mount Sinai. Watch this now. It's very important. And they saw the God of Israel. There was under his feet, as it were, a pavement of sapphire stone, like the very heaven for clarity. And he did not lay his hand on the chief of men of Israel. What did Israel think? They thought that God appeared to them to destroy them. But the 70 elders of Israel can go up in the presence of God, and they see the glory of God, and they eat a meal in his presence. Yes, God's purpose for Israel was not destructive, but they did not trust him. So we go back to Exodus 19 on verse 16 now, this time. On the morning of the third day, there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud on the mountain, very loud trumpet blasts, so that all the people in the camp trembled. I was looking at this passage again, as I've done many times, but this you never observe everything in a passage in any specific study that you do. So one time I thought, well, I'm going to study this word tremble. And I found out that there are 17 words in Hebrew for trembling. That's the strangest thing I can't even imagine. I think I've been told that it's wrong, but there's a tradition that for Eskimos, they have 20 some different words for snow. Snow as it's falling, snow as it's evaporating before it hits the ground, snow as it's blowing, snow as it's piled up. When something is a major part of your life, you have lots of synonyms for it. Well, apparently they have a lot of reasons for talking about trembling. This word is used in a specific way. It occurs 39 times in the Hebrew Bible. And virtually, if not virtually every time it occurs in the context where people are trembling because they think disaster is confronting them. So the brothers are coming back from Egypt. They find the silver in the mouth of their sacks. They tremble because now, if they go back, they're going to look like thieves. And so Joseph has made it harder for them to come back, so that they will. And by the way, Joseph's purpose in all of this is not punitive and it's not retribution. Joseph's purpose is to find out, have they learned to practice family loyalty or not? Are they going to be loyal to the family? And especially, are they going to be loyal to the son of, oh goodness, who's Joseph's mother? Rachel. Are they going to be loyal to the son of Rachel or not? So he makes it hard on them to be certain that they are loyal to the family. They trembled when Isaac was confronted by Esau looking for the blessing. Isaac trembled. Why? Because he realized that his plot to bless Esau has failed and disaster has come. Does this make sense? Yes? So They tremble because they think disaster is coming. Is it now? You've read this. How many times have you read Exodus in your life? Uh, Uncounted times, no doubt. Um, uh, what is there that God did in his dealings with Israel since Moses went back to Egypt? What is there that God did that suggested his purpose was to destroy them? Nothing. Nothing at all. He brings 10 plagues. Yeah, their lot gets a little more difficult under the plagues. Yes, right? But that's not destruction. Um, but they never trust God. They never trust God in all of this. They go because they're forced out of Egypt effectively. And they cross the Red Sea because they're forced to, because the Egyptians are following. And, and they when they get across the Red Sea, they don't go back to Egypt because the Red Sea's there and they can't get across it. And so they follow the cloud and pillar of fire, but they can't see that God's purpose for them is benevolent, that he wants to do something great with them. So they trembled. This is an indication that they don't trust God, and that's justified. Let's see a little bit later. Let's turn. I think we did this last week. I'm sorry that I'm repeating this, but repetition is the mother of learning, and also forgetfulness is the mother of repetition. So Deuteronomy chapter 5. Uh, um, we looked, I think, surely at this last week, but I want you to see it again in this same context. This is the appearance of God in glory on the mountain. And in chapter 5, verse um, 20, let's see, 22, let's start there. These words the Lord spoke to all your assembly at the mountain out of the midst of the fire, the cloud, and the thick darkness with a loud voice, and he added no more, and he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone and gave them to me. And as soon as you heard the voice out of the midst of the darkness, while the mountain was burning with fire, you came near to me, all the heads of your tribes and your elders, and you said, behold, and a friend of mine told me this, my interpretation of Exodus 19 is wrong because of this passage. But I want you to see how this passage confirms the interpretation I'm giving. Now, behold, the Lord our God has shown us his glory and greatness, and we have heard his voice out of the midst of the fire. This day we have seen God speak with man, and man still live. Now, therefore, why should we die? For this great fire will consume us. If we hear the voice of the Lord our God anymore, we will die. They don't believe that God has a benevolent purpose for them. They believe he intends to kill them. And effectively, what they're saying is, we can't go near. If you want to go near, Moses, you go on. We're not going to go. So if you're willing to face death, terribly cynical, go near and hear all that the Lord our God will say, and speak to us all that the Lord our God will speak to you, and we will hear and do it. And the Lord heard your words when you spoke to me. And here's again an apparent contradiction of my interpretation, but let me show you that it really fits. And the Lord said to me, I have heard the words of this people, which they have spoken to you. They are right in all that they have spoken. Now, that sounds like it invalidates my interpretation, but look at the next verse. Oh, that they had such a heart as this always to fear me and to keep my commandments, that it might go well with them and with their children forever. What this expression, oh, that in Hebrew, I've looked at every place where it occurs in the Hebrew Bible, and every place it occurs, it is, I wish this was the case, but it's not. So they don't have such a heart to fear him and obey him always. They have no such heart. They have no such attitude toward God. So even Deuteronomy 5, I think, confirms the interpretation I've been given. Folks, what we've got to pay attention to is what the Bible talks about when it talks about law. The law is not given for a righteous man, but for sinners, Paul says. Am I making sense to you? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. The law works wrath, Paul says. Does that make sense? You need to read through looking for these kinds of statements, because we value the law in ways that it wasn't intended to be valued. We look at the law of God and we say, the law of God, this is wonderful. We will teach the people the law of God, and they will become wonderful God-fearing, God-serving people. But this is not, in fact, the case. Turn to Romans chapter 7. In Romans 7, I haven't looked at this translation in Romans 7 to see what they do with it, but we shall see. Let me start with verse 4. Likewise, my brothers, you also have died to the law through the body of Christ. So that you may belong to another, to him who has been raised from the dead, in order that we may bear fruit to God. What is the fruit that we would bear for God? What do you think?
The righteousness,
What do you mean by righteousness?
the likeness of Christ.
Live holy life.
Yeah. Holy life. Good. Yeah. Right. The
Faith
law.
relation.
Surely, if we had the law, we would have all the instructions we need. Yes. That's not what Paul says.
Faith
We
relation.
died to the law. Yes. It's like leaving India. If you leave India, you are, for the most part, no longer under Indian law. Now, as a citizen of India, if you betray governmental officials or something of that sort, then you would still be under Indian law. But the United States would have to, for example, if you came to the U.S., we would have to extradite you to India, and we might not do that, especially if you served our purposes. Yes, does that make sense? So, if you've died to the law, folks, if I die tomorrow, how many of the laws of America will apply to me?
None.
None. So what if you died to the law? What if you died to a world in which law ruled? What would that mean?
I'm no
We
longer
move to
under the
another.
law.
Yeah, you're not under the law. He goes on, verse 5, while we were living in the flesh. Now, what is flesh? What have you been taught about flesh?
The old nature.
The old nature. What does that mean? Give me another synonym for old nature.
Sinfulness.
sinfulness. Yeah, and sin nature. Do you know, brothers and sisters, do you realize that the phrase sin nature and old nature never occur in the Bible? Not once. Some of the translations have them, but they never occur in either the Hebrew of the Old Testament or in the Greek of the New. Flesh is not sin nature, and I will try to show you that here. So verse, where did we stop? Verse 4, Romans 7:4. Likewise, my brothers, you also have died to the law through the body of Christ, so that you may belong to another, to him who has been raised from the dead, in order that we may bear fruit to God. For while we were living in the flesh, our sinful passions, aroused by the law. What does the law do? Say it.
It provokes us, maybe.
Say what?
It provokes us to sin, probably.
Yes. The law arouses our sinful passions. How does it say it? Verse 5. Verse 6. We were released from the law, having died to that by which we. Let's see. No, it's verse 5. When we were living in the flesh, our sinful passions, aroused by the law, were at work in our members to bear fruit to death. Flesh, brothers and sisters, is my desire to have a rule to obey. I think I can obey God and do all the rules. Just give me a rule and I'll do it. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. But my flesh has a capacity that thwarts all this. The capacity is going to be called, well, I'm going to call it, because I think that is consistent with what Paul is doing in Romans 7. I'm going to call it desire for law righteousness. The flesh is not so much, in fact, it isn't at all my desire to sin. The flesh is my desire to have a rule I can keep so that I can avoid sin. The problem is, when I try to keep the rule, I end up breaking the rule. And let me show you that as it unfolds. Verse 6, but now we are released from the law, having died to that by which we were held captive, so that we serve in the new way of the Spirit and not in the old way of the written code. What then shall we say? That the law is sin? By no means. What is the purpose of law anyway? When you think about law in your nation, what is the purpose of the law?
Maintain order.
Maintain order, yes.
Discipline.
Say again?
Discipline.
Yes. In what sense?
To punish those who break it.
Yes. You can do justice and really do justice, but you can do it in a way that looks unjust, and that ends up serving injustice. So you could do something that's right and good and just and fair, but do it in such a way that it will make people angry at you and they want to kill you for having done such a thing. So the reason for the law is so that God will be seen to be just in dealing with sinners. It is not to produce righteousness. Did the giving of the law in Exodus produce righteousness in Israel? Did the giving of the law in Leviticus produce righteousness in Israel? Did the giving of the law in Numbers, did the giving of the law in Deuteronomy produce righteousness in Israel? And the answer is no, it didn't. Then what will produce righteousness? Well, grace, which enables us to live by faith and satisfy all the demands of the law. But I don't like grace. I want to know exactly what I'm supposed to do in this particular instance. So if somebody's wronged me, I want to know how much I can wrong him and get away with it without being unjust. I don't want to forgive. I want to get vengeance on the person who's wronged me. It goes on here, verse 8, but sin seizing opportunity through the commandment. When he talks about sin here, it's not talking about our sin nature, but it's talking about indwelling sin. Indwelling sin, when it's not fed law, is dormant. But when you feed it law, it comes back to life and produces acts of sin. That's not sin nature, it's indwelling sin. That's what Paul calls it. I'd rather use a biblical phrase to explain a concept rather than one that we've constructed, especially one that doesn't fit well with the context. He goes on, verse 8, sin taking opportunity through the commandment produced in me all kinds of covetousness, for without the law, sin lies dead. Yes, you want to take charge of indwelling sin and keep it reined in. Don't feed it law, because the more law you give it, the more it's going to violate the very law you're trying to feed it. So if you will live by faith, live by grace, you will find victory over law. Later in chapter 7, let me skip several verses here. Verse 15, for I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. For I do not, let's see, now if I do what I do not want, I agree with the law that it's good. So now it's no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells in me. See, it's here, the kind of sin that Paul's talking about in Romans 7 is the kind of sin you're trying to avoid and end up committing it. So it's against your will. It wasn't what you tried to, it was not what you were seeking. So he says later in the chapter, verse 21, so I find it to be a law that when I want to do right, evil lies close at hand. For I delight in the law of God in my inner being, but I see in my members another law, waging against the law of my mind and taking me captive to the law of sin that dwells on my members. Wretched man that I am. The more I try to obey the law, the more sin I find in my life. So what is the solution? Well, chapter 8, verse 1. There is therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus. For the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus has set you free from the law of sin and death. The only thing that the law of God can do for you is put you to death spiritually. So if that's not what you want, then you have to learn to live by grace and by faith. Let's go back to Exodus 19 now. What's going on then?
What is the fruit here that mentioned in 7:5? Fruit for God.
Yeah, that's coming from grace and through faith. So when I trust God, all of you have the experience of close friends and family members whom you love dearly and they love you dearly, but they ask you to do things that you really don't want to do. Yes, they're not evil things, but they ask you to do things that you just really don't want to do. Why if you comply with their request, why do you do it?
Out of love.
Yeah, precisely. And that's what it's all about in our faith response to God. Um, the language of friendship is used in an isolated way in reference to our relationship with God. Much more common is father and child. Much more common is Lord and servant, right? But friendship, there are one or two places where this occurs. Friends can ask friends to do things that no one else can ask a friend to do. Yes? And because of your regard for your friend, you will go do it, even if it's not really what you want to do. Yes? So if I trust God and he asks me to do something, then I'm more likely to do it because I trust him, not because I'm trying to get credit with him that I can call back, you know, at some point and get him to do something for me. But just because he loved me and gave himself for me, then what can he ask me to do? Well, he can ask me to do anything. And out of love, my proper response is, okay, I trust him. I don't understand this thing that he's asked me to go through. I don't understand how I'm going to survive it, but I will try it and let's see what God does. You see the difference between law and faith and grace. So Israel has rejected a grace relationship. Consequently, God follows this up with a law relationship. So let me make sure I've covered everything. I'm back in Exodus 19 now, verse 23. The fence is still up around the mountain because they're not worthy to go up. They can't go up. They've rejected the position of priesthood. So I ask people, did Israel ever become a kingdom of priests? And the answer is no. Israel's kingdom of priesthood would have been, they would live so richly under the blessing of God that the nations would be attracted to them. In writing on this last week, or week before last, it occurred to me, I can only think of two occasions in Israel's history when pagans were attracted to God or attracted to Israel by the blessing of God upon them. The first one I can think of is the Queen of Sheba, who came from what would have been the end of the earth. It's all the way down in Yemen, where she came from, which is not nearly the end of the earth, but for that part of the world, it's the end of the earth. But she came from all the way down there in Yemen up to Jerusalem to see this thing. And because she couldn't believe the word that she was hearing. And she said, this is clearly the greatness of Israel. The other occasion is the man Naaman the Syrian, who is stricken with leprosy, and his Israelite slave girl tells her mistress, there's a prophet in Israel, and if Naaman would just go to the prophet would deal with him. And he went grudgingly, and then was asked to dip in the Jordan River 3 times, and the Jordan would have been a muddy, fairly slow moving river, highly silted, and they had clean and beautiful rivers in Syria. But his supporters said, look, if he had asked you to do some great thing, you would have done it. All he's asked you to do is this. And as you recall, the end of the story is that Naaman says to Elisha, I will no more pray to any other God or sacrifice except to the Lord, the God of Israel. So attracted to God by the blessing upon Israel. That was what I think Kingdom of Priests was intended to mean. And if that is, then you see that in the history of Israel, they never really functioned that way. Only in the isolated occasions of the Queen of Sheba and Naaman the Syrian and Elisha is that even the case. Our purpose as a kingdom of priests is different. We are not to attract the people to us. We're to go to them and take the priesthood and the ministry of the priesthood. But I must add here, the priesthood for us is also what we do for each other. So is there any sacrificial language applied to the church in the New Testament and our ministry?
Romans 12.
Pardon?
Romans 12.
Romans 12. Good. Excellent. Make your bodies a living sacrifice. Now, folks, how long does it take to make a dead sacrifice? Well, I don't know, a couple of hours, I suppose. How long does it take to make a living sacrifice?
Lifetime.
It's a lifetime.
And which is more costly for the offerer? A dead sacrifice, if I slaughter an ox, or if I sacrifice myself for a lifetime, which is more costly to the offerer?
The later part.
The latter. So this is a costly sacrifice, and there's a lot in the New Testament about our priestly ministry. I won't go into it. Perhaps we may take a session at some point a little bit later when we start talking about the priesthood in chapter 10, and we'll talk about our priesthood and what that means. But at this point, I just point out to you that we are a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And if that's the case, then we need to find out what our priesthood is, because most of us haven't been living in the priesthood. Am I making sense to you? We haven't been practicing our priesthood. Well, if it was shameful for Israel, how much more shameful is it for us who are recipients of the Holy Spirit? Generosity in giving is a sacrifice. There are many other things that are sacrifices. I just point out, see, most of you don't know this, I don't suppose. I have a doctorate from Dallas Theological Seminary, and I know great and wise things most people don't know. And one of the things I know is that Romans 12:1 and 2 comes before Romans 12:3. Amen. So thank you for laughing, at least the one that I can see laughing. That's always intended to be a joke, and I will say it again at some point. But in Romans 12:3-8, making your body a living sacrifice occurs through ministry and spiritual gifting. You think more highly of yourself than you ought to think, verse 3, when you are engaged in life in the community and you're receiving ministry but never giving it. That's 12:3-8. 12:9 to the end of chapter 13. Well, it's not quite the end of 13. I'm sorry, that's not right. 12:9 through not quite the end of 13:9 or so. You make your body a living sacrifice by loving without play acting. In Romans 14:1 to 15:13, you make yourself your body a living sacrifice by accepting people who differ with you in the way the Christian life ought to be lived. People who, in Romans, there are people who won't eat meat, and they condemn those who do eat meat, and those who eat meat despise those who won't eat meat. Which one's right? No answer?
Again, sir, say it again.
Yeah. Okay.
Neither.
There are those, the weak eat only vegetables. The strong eat meat. The strong despise the weak, and the weak condemn the strong. Which one's right?
Neither.
Neither.
Neither one. Both are wrong. Because you're to make your body a living sacrifice.
Both.
Yes? Oh, both, you said. Okay. I thought you said doctor. So this is another way you make your body a living sacrifice. And there are lots and lots of passages on this. Evangelism, Romans 15, is priestly ministry. So we've got lots of priestly work to do. We need to do some work figuring out what our priesthood is and what it entails. Back to Exodus 19 now. The reason for the law that follows. Let me say this much about chapter 20 in Exodus. These are the 10 commandments, as you know. The 10 commandments are not law. And you will say, well, they sound like it. But in fact, they're not law. As my favorite professor said, law without penalty is just good advice. There is effectively no penalty assessed for any of the 10 commandments. These are, in Old Testament scholarship, fairly widely held to be the policies of the covenant. They are not the laws. So you can, and we had a course in my studies on Deuteronomy, and the Prof said, with reference to Deuteronomy 5 and the 10 Commandments there, that there were people who had tried to outline the book of Deuteronomy based on the 10 Commandments. I have a friend who tried to do that. I'm not sure that he was successful. I don't see that structure in Deuteronomy myself, but there are people who've tried to do that. These are the policies of the covenant. You shall have no other gods before me. Why?
I'm the only true God.
Because there is no one who
But-
can be called as God.
Yeah, but there's a basic reason for that. To have another God is high treason. All right? Does that make sense? This is high treason. This is the kingdom of God. And if you seek another king, I was in the United States Army, and if I had defected to an enemy military force, that would have been high treason, and I could be put to death. So you shall have no other gods before me. Let's see. You shall not take the name of the Lord or your God in vain. You shall not make vows that you don't fulfill. The word in Hebrew, take the name, is to lift up the name to vanity. And that would be, as it were, lifting your hand in an oath that you're going to do something and you don't do it, you don't fulfill it. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. These are policies of the kingdom. What is the purpose of the Sabbath day? Christians almost always miss this. What is the purpose of the Sabbath day?
To abstain from work.
Who abstains from work?
Everybody.
To abstain from work and devote yourself to God.
No, no, not. There was never any specific religious gathering on Sabbath.
That even your maids and maidservants should
That's the purpose, so that those who work for you and even your animals will get a rest. It's not for you to rest, it's for you to give them a rest. Does that make sense to you? God gave rest, then you give rest, in effect. So you see the point here? Yes, no? Yeah, okay. So the Ten Commandments. Yes?
Time up. It's time, sir.
Oh, it is time. Oh,
Yeah.
fish feather. Okay. Well, we've done enough with Exodus that we have laid the foundation to talk about Leviticus. So we'll turn to Leviticus 1 next week, and we'll work over the overview of the book and then go into Leviticus 1 and keep going. Well, let's close with prayer. Father, once again, we plead for you to grant us to understand who we are, how we're to live before you. Teach us that you're looking for a freely given response, not obedience driven by fear of the law. So teach us that you are trustworthy and we can always count on you, that you're loyal and you will always remain loyal to us, sustaining us in everything, even when we can't see how your sustaining hand is holding us. So teach us to trust you that way, Father, and then we will do great and wonderful things. For Jesus' sake we pray. Amen. Thank you, folks, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.